So there has been a lot of speculation over these last several months about where WWE programming across the board was going to land. Raw, SmackDown, NXT, all the rights deals were coming up. SmackDown was the first domino to fall. And we found out that SmackDown was leaving Fox and it was going back to USA Network. And then we found out that NXT, for the first time in the history of the show, from the time it debuted on the WWE Network to its time on USA, was going to be making its way over to an over-the-air broadcast channel for the very first time, when they made the deal to go to the CW. And when that deal was made, I had tweeted at the time that I thought WWE might want to spread itself across all the major platforms and have one show on broadcast television, one on cable, and maybe Raw would go to a streaming service like an Amazon. So that way they would be represented across all three. Because you listen to these WWE quarterly calls, every year you hear Nick Khan and Vince McMahon and different people talking about the future and streaming and Amazon and Netflix and Hulu and all these different services. And for all the talk about streaming, it was just very odd to me that they would be making potentially 3 different media rights deals, and not one of them would be for a streaming service. And then the rumors kicked up, and I never bought into the likelihood of it happening for real. I never thought the likelihood was very high of this happening, but, WWE might take Raw and make a deal with Warner Brothers Discovery to put Raw on either TNT or TBS. In fact, in my predictions for 2024, I said I thought AEW would stay on TNT and TBS, and would get a rights increase. That remains to be seen. But if they were going to move Raw to TNT or TBS, you were not going to have AEW on the same network. Today's news certainly bodes well for Tony Khan's hopes of renewing with Warner Brothers Discovery. We'll see how the NBA rights shake out first. But the story was a blockbuster this morning, the announcement that WWE has reached a deal with Netflix to bring Raw to the streaming service beginning next January. The headline from Variety reads, Netflix WWE strike deal to move Monday Night Raw to streamer beginning in 2025 for $500 million per year. It is truly the end of an era. For the first time since the show started airing in 1993, Raw will no longer be airing on linear TV. So think about it, from a 1-hour show at the Manhattan Center with an Undertaker Damien Demento main event to a 3-hour show worth $5 billion. This is from Variety. In a major shakeup, WWE has struck a deal with Netflix that will see its flagship weekly live pro wrestling show begin airing exclusively on the streaming giant beginning in January 2025. That will mark the first time in its 3-decade history that Raw has not aired new episodes on a linear television network. The deal is valued at $500 million per year for 10 years. Netflix has the option to opt out after the initial 5 years, which would be January of 2031, and to extend for an additional 10 years. So as little as 5, but potentially up to a total of 15 years. If I'm understanding this correctly, they would have the option of extending 10 years once they hit the 5-year mark. So that would be a total of 15 years, not 20. Again, that's if I'm understanding this correctly. Netflix being able to cancel Raw after 5 years is very unlike Netflix. I'm surprised they didn't insist on having the right to cancel after the 2nd season, like they do with their other shows. Keep in mind, Fox decided not to renew with WWE for SmackDown at the end of this year because they felt for the money they were paying, $1 billion over 5 years, they felt that they were not getting the return on investment that they expected. So it's possible that the same thing could play out here with Netflix after 5 years, but they are locked in at least for that amount of time. WWE's current deal with NBC Universal has Raw airing on USA Network until October 2024. According to an individual with knowledge of the situation, exactly where Raw will air between the end of that deal and the beginning of the Netflix deal is still being determined. Now, they have the existing relationship with NBC Universal, so if they wanted to try to work something out on a short-term basis to either keep Raw on USA an extra 3 months, I'm sure that they would be willing to at least hear them out on that. I'm sure they could reach some kind of an understanding. It's not like it's an acrimonious split. This is not like it was before, when they left Spike to go back to USA, and that was not a very happy time between the two sides. And not only that, but again, they're still doing business with NBC Universal and USA Network because SmackDown is going back to USA. So it's not like they're going to be completely divorced from USA just because they're not going to have Raw. So in my mind, they're either going to stay on USA a few extra months, or, hey, they could always move the show to Peacock. They could work out some kind of a deal with NBC Universal and maybe do a little test run on a streaming service and air Raw on Peacock. But my guess is that they'll end up on USA for a few extra months. I don't really see that as being a big deal. Under the deal, Netflix will become the exclusive home of Raw in the US, Canada, the UK, Latin America, and other territories once the deal begins, with more countries and regions to be added over time. Netflix will also become the television home for all WWE shows outside the US, which includes fellow weekly shows SmackDown and NXT, as well as annual live events like WrestleMania, SummerSlam, and the Royal Rumble, as well as documentaries, original series, and additional projects. The deal is the final step in WWE's latest round of TV rights deals. It was previously announced that the rights to SmackDown had been sold to NBC Universal in USA in a 5-year, $1.4 billion deal. Not long after, it was announced that NXT would be moving from USA to the CW. A source close to the deal pegged the value to WWE at about $20 to $25 million per year, also for 5 years. And their current 5-year deal for Raw with NBC Universal is said to be worth between $250 and $260 million per year. I'm not going to break down all the math and try to figure out how much of an actual rights increase that works out to be for Raw, because this deal is for more than just Raw. Again, it's for everything, including the PLEs outside the US. This is not just a Raw rights deal. But it does work out to be a healthy increase that is in line with what they were hoping for. So in the end, they got what they wanted. The story continues. Acquiring rights to Raw solidifies Netflix's push into live programming, with the streamer having just tested the waters with live streaming of late. In March, Netflix debuted its first ever live event with the comedy special Chris Rock's Selective Outrage. They followed up with a live Love is Blind reunion special in April. But with Raw, Netflix will have a live program that runs weekly, year-round. Such a move is a necessity for the trailblazer of the streaming revolution, with multiple competitors already offering regular live sports programs to their subscribers. Amazon, for example, locked up the exclusive rights to the NFL's Thursday Night Football for 10 years, beginning with the 2023 season. Peacock, the current home to WWE library content and live events in the US, recently racked up 23 million viewers when it aired the NFL playoff game between the Kansas City Chiefs and the Miami Dolphins. What the Variety story did not say is how much of a mixed bag that live experiment was for Netflix. It is still very much a work in progress. So the Chris Rock special that they mentioned, the Chris Rock special, by all accounts, went very well. The Love is Blind special did not. They were scheduled to air a reunion special for their Love is Blind reality series. It was going to be live on a Sunday night. 90 minutes later, they threw in the towel trying to get the thing to stream, and they opted to release it as a taped special the next day instead. And in the end, Netflix blamed a technical bug for the delay. Oh, it was a glitch, whatever the excuse was. So they've had one success and they've had one failure so far. This is going to be a huge test for them now. To stream live 52 weeks a year, maybe 51 if they take off around Christmas. 52 weeks a year consistently, because they have not yet proven that they can do so without running into problems. They just have not had they don't have that proof of concept yet. They're going to be airing the Screen Actors Guild Awards next month for the first time live, so that'll be the next test. They're obviously confident they can pull it off. So is WWE. They have a year to work out the kinks and make sure they get it right. Mark Shapiro said Amazon. Mark Shapiro was the COO of Endeavor. He said Amazon's ability to stream Thursday Night Football this season without a glitch and Peacock's recent success streaming an NFL playoff game gave him the confidence that Netflix will be technologically sound streaming Raw, even if it has not done anything like this on a consistent basis yet. So again, it's a risk. It's definitely a risk, but they're pretty confident it'll work out in the end. Alex Sherman had a story on CNBC.com. And in the story, he said that TKO held discussions with other media companies but zeroed in on Netflix in December, according to people familiar with the matter. Because there have been rumors going around for months about where Raw was going to land, and not just Warner Brothers Discovery. We heard FX, so maybe a deal with Disney to put Raw on the FX network. Maybe there was a chance it might stay with USA. There were all sorts of stories floating around. And the fact that this really only came together in December, or at least they started talking to them and getting serious about it in December, shows you, I don't want to say last minute necessarily, but it kind of feels like a last minute type of situation here where they came together late in the game, even though they are still with USA until October. It's not like the deal was running out next month, but they have wanted to wrap this up quickly. They wrapped up SmackDown, they wrapped up NXT. I never thought they wanted to drag this out for half the year. And so it's only been about a month or so since they sat down and really got serious about this and they were able to make the deal. Now, Brandon Thurston of WrestleNomics noted that Netflix is easily the most popular subscription streaming service in the US, have about 77 million subscribers between the US and Canada, and 247 million subscribers worldwide. And he says Netflix does not disclose a straightforward number of U.S. subscribers. If subscriptions between the U.S. and Canada are distributed equally relative to their populations, that would mean there are about 69 million Netflix subscribers in the U.S., a number that is nearly crossing paths with the 70 million households in the U.S. that have some form of traditional cable TV. And that includes cable, satellite, things like YouTube TV and Sling. There's a lot that's been made in recent years about the death of cable, and that streaming was the next big thing. Everybody is going to migrate to streaming. People are cutting the cord. I'm one of those people. I cut the cord because my cable company kept raising rates and raising rates and raising rates on me, and I said, enough, this is ridiculous. I have all these channels I don't watch. Even if I, keep reducing the package and have fewer channels, it was still costing me all this money. I said, the hell with this. And I went to a totally different service. And of course, then they said, oh, well, what can we do to help bring your bill down? And even with all the discounts and everything they offered me, I was still going to pay half with the other service that I would have paid if I would have stayed with them. I said, the hell with this. I said, that's it. I'm done. I'm finished. And there are a lot of people who are like that. That being said, cable television is far from dead, and it's not going to be dead anytime soon. But you do have a number of people who are making the switch, and eventually those numbers, I think, are going to level out. It may not happen right away, but you could see. You could see the decline in people who have had cable traditionally who have said, look, I'm going to go somewhere else. That's a real phenomenon that's been happening. Maybe not as quickly as some people said that it would, but it is happening. For WWE, this is a great deal. It's a great deal because they're getting a shit ton of money for their content, for Raw and this other content as well. Again, it's not just Raw, but they're getting a ton of money. And they're also getting a presence on the biggest streaming service in the world. So this is a win-win situation for WWE as far as forging this relationship with Netflix. Because again, it gives them now a presence across multiple platforms instead of just one. It's a great deal for Netflix because the loyal WWE fan base, and you do have a loyal fan base. When WWE creatively was at its worst, okay, I sat through it. I reviewed a lot of those shows. You know it because you watched a lot of those same shows if you're listening to this right now, or if you've been a fan of the podcast for any length of time. We saw some bad television, right? Even when WWE was at its worst. It's still like the bottom was still at a certain level and it rarely would drop below that. I mean, the audience was still eroding a little bit at a time, but they still had that sort of base that they were not going to go down below that level. There's a certain number of fans that will watch and will stick with the product no matter what. And you have a lot of loyal fans who will tune in and week out to Raw, SmackDown, NXT, everything, right? All the pay-per-views. That loyal fan base is going to migrate over to Netflix if they're not already on there. So if you're someone who let your subscription lapse, you used to be a Netflix subscriber and then you didn't want to subscribe anymore, you didn't have any shows that you were interested in, or you couldn't afford it anymore, you weren't really using it, there's a pretty good chance that they're going to turn around those people now and renew so they can still watch Raw. Because people are creatures of habit. There are people that have been watching Raw since the very beginning, through the good times and the bad. And after 30 some odd years, they're not just going to say, oh, well, damn, I don't have a Netflix subscription, or I don't really feel like paying a few extra bucks for Netflix, so I guess I'm not going to watch Raw anymore. You'll have some people like that, but I believe that the vast majority of people who tune into Raw week in and week out are not going to suddenly give up on watching Raw. But also, what is the thing that Netflix is known for, right? Being able to binge watch an entire season of episodes. You can sit down, you can watch a good 8 to 10 episodes straight of a show as soon as it drops. And then it's on to the next thing. And if it's not on Netflix, you cancel your subscription. You dip in, you dip out. This gives people an incentive to stick around because it's weekly. And it also gives Netflix a leg up on other streaming services that someone might decide, you know what? Something has to be sacrificed here. I only have so much money that I could spend in a given month. They might give Max or Hulu the boot if they want to make sure they can tune into Raw live every single week. Some people also, they don't want to watch Raw on DVR. They have to watch it live. Otherwise, they might get spoiled. There are those people as well. They're going to want to tune into the show live. They're not going to want to watch it after the fact. So if you're Netflix, this is a risk worth taking, because you are very likely going to bring back or bring in a wealth of new subscribers. What that exact number is going to be, we don't know yet. But I do think they're going to bring a lot of people in who are very loyal to the show and are committed to making sure that they can watch Raw every single week. And as far as the fans, how does it affect the fans? Well, I'll use myself as an example. I'm a Netflix subscriber. I have a Netflix subscription to the premium tier, which has, no ads, and there's a lot of content on there that I do watch. There's a bunch of shows on there that I like. So as a current Netflix subscriber, I think it's great, because I'm just going to continue to pay what I'm already paying. I'm already on the service. But I know other people can't afford so many different streaming services and the constant price increases. On the same day that Netflix announced this deal for Raw, today, they also reported their fourth quarter earnings, and they announced that they are retiring their ad-free basic subscription plan, the one that costs $11.99 a month. They had already pulled the plan for new members and returning members. You can't get it anymore. But they're officially discontinuing it in some countries where it's still available. So they're going to start with Canada and the UK, and then they say they'll go from there. They'll probably expand it out to other places, and they'll pull it from there too. So that leaves people with the $15 monthly option as their cheapest ad-free plan. That's a good jump from $11.99 to $15.49. Or you pay $22.99 for the premium tier. You can pay for the ad version. That's $6.99. But when you've got Netflix and Hulu and Peacock and Max and Disney Plus and Paramount is another one, then you have music services, right? Some people have music service subscriptions, Spotify and Pandora. I pay for that one because I hate that they limit you to 6 skips per station. If you pay for it, it's unlimited. Ever since I started working from home, that's become a godsend for me. So yeah, for me, it was worth it, so I can get rid of the skip limit. But all these things add up. And you know damn well that spending $5 billion for WWE, there's going to be even more Netflix increases coming. Oh, you wait. You just wait. They're going to pass that cost on to the consumer. They're going to pass that cost on to you and me. A year from now, I'll be surprised if we're not looking at $30 every month for the premium tier. Are they going to lose some audience because of the move from cable to streaming? Some, yes. But I don't think it's going to be a death knell for Raw or anything like that. They may take a hit, but I don't think it's going to be anything so drastic that they lose fans and you start seeing half-empty buildings and lower gates and things of that nature. But there are a few key questions coming out of this announcement, and the biggest one, for myself, and I'm sure a lot of other people, and this is the one that we still have no clarification on, is will Raw remain 3 hours? Or are they going to scale the show back to 2 hours, which is what they should do? From a financial perspective, it might not make sense for them to do that because it just feels to me like Netflix is paying for a 3-hour show. There's been no indication that there's even been discussions about scaling the show back to 2 hours. And for the interviews that I saw today with Nick Khan and Ari Emanuel and these different people, it was never brought up by anybody. To me, that would have been the most important question. Nobody bothered asking it, so we still don't have an answer. And frankly, they may not have an answer either. I feel like a lot of those decisions maybe have not yet been fully fleshed out. But if I had to venture a guess, is Raw going to stay at 3 hours or go back to 2? They're very likely going to stay at 3 hours. I feel like the money that Netflix is paying them, and they had a mention in the announcement in some of these articles that, 3 hours of Raw, there was no indication of anything changing in that regard. So unfortunately, although we don't have a final confirmed answer, my gut tells me that, unfortunately, this show is probably still going to remain at 3 hours. 3 hours was always believed to have been a USA Network request that Vince McMahon granted to them. He said, sure, we'll expand the show to 3 hours because Raw was the crown jewel for USA Network and they wanted more of it because it helped the network out and it bumps them up in the weekly television rankings. Right? The more the merrier. If you're USA Network, that's how they feel about it. And it's hard to believe that it's already been over a decade. It feels kind of baked in at this point. That the show is what it is. But all that money that Netflix paid for that television show, they're paying for a 3-hour television show. So why would they spend all that money for less content? When you look at it through that lens, it doesn't make a whole lot of sense, even though I do feel like it would make the shows flow better. And it would be a lot more tolerable if it was at 2 hours instead of 3. We don't have a final answer on that. The other question is, will Raw remain on Mondays? Nick Khan was on Pat McAfee's show. He was asked whether Raw will stay on Monday nights when it moves to Netflix. And after saying that they still have almost a year until it happens, he did acknowledge the competition from the NFL. Obviously, Monday Night Football is up against Raw for a good chunk of the year. And he did say that they perform well against the college football national championship game, but it was clear that moving Raw to a less competitive night is a possibility. And it's also worth noting that in the announcement, in the press release, they did not refer to it as Monday Night Raw. It was only referred to it as Raw. It was WWE Raw, not Monday Night Raw. So the answer is that there is no answer yet. There's no final decision that has been made, and that's straight from Nick Khan himself. But both sides are open to moving the show to another night. And if they did, I still feel Tuesday or Wednesday would be the likeliest nights. I mean, look, if the idea is to steer clear of the NFL, you don't want competition from the NFL, then that would rule out Mondays and that would rule out Thursdays. Raw on any other night but Monday would just not feel right to me, though. And I expect SmackDown to change nights because I just would be surprised if USA opted to keep the show on Friday nights. Friday nights is not a very friendly night for television. Why would they keep the show on Fridays? It just wouldn't make any sense. If Raw stays on Mondays, and I'm hoping it does, if it stays on Mondays, then maybe SmackDown gets the Tuesday spot and they go back-to-back early in the week. But when it comes to Raw and SmackDown, that's what I think we're looking at here. I think we're looking at, if they move Raw, then that changes things a little bit. Again, I would think you're looking at Tuesday or Wednesday. But if Raw does stay on Monday, I think as far as SmackDown, you would be looking at a Tuesday-Wednesday situation. They're not going to run the weekend, right? So your options are fairly limited. That's how I think it's going to work out in the end, though. And I want to clarify something that Nick Khan said on McAfee's show because some people were confused. And all it takes is a few people to post something and then, everybody else runs with it. He made a comment in the course of talking about how this all came about and the previous rights deals, and then they became very hyper-focused on Raw. He made a comment and said, what we did once the SmackDown deal closed, which will shift SmackDown over from Fox to USA starting this October 1, we focused or hyper-focused on Raw. He was not saying that SmackDown is debuting on October 1st. October 1st is a Tuesday. And so people heard that and they said, oh, it just leaked. SmackDown's going to be airing on Tuesdays. It might in the end end up airing on Tuesdays, but that's not what he meant. And so I just wanted to clarify that because people think that was some kind of confirmation. It was not. Also on Pat McAfee's show, just a little side note here, Nick Khan told an interesting story. He said Triple H is the one who first introduced him, when he was still a sports agent, to Vince McMahon. He made the introduction. Triple H called him out of the blue one day, unsolicited, and this was right after Tim Tebow got cut by the Patriots. So that would have been 2013. It was certainly before he played in the minor leagues for the Mets. And Khan at the time was representing him, and Triple H asked him, hey, what do you think about Tim Tebow against the Big Show at WrestleMania? And by that timeline, it would have been WrestleMania 30 in New Orleans. That would have been the following year. And there was a secret meeting that was held out in California with Tebow, Nick Khan, Triple H, and Vince McMahon. That did take place, and in the end, they couldn't reach a deal. But he kept in touch from that point forward with Triple H, and the rest is history. So Tim Tebow being cut by the Patriots ultimately led to WWE getting $5 billion from Netflix. How wild is that? Another question, will there still be commercials? This we do have an answer for. Per CNBC, they say that the matches will be scripted around commercial breaks to satisfy ad-free customers who will see continued action from live matches that are not important to the outcome. For example, a wrestler in a sustained headlock. How very exciting. This is according to a person familiar with the matter. So if you are a subscriber and you have the standard or the premium tier, you get no ad breaks, right? Like the folks on the lowest tier would have ads, you get no ad breaks. So when they cut away for what would be an ad break for those people, everybody else would stick with the match. So think of it like the way AEW airs internationally on Fight TV when they go to break. It'll work the same way. You're not going to see anything terribly important. They might slow the match down until the break is over. But it's still better than getting 4 minutes of the same commercials over and over again. And then what does this mean for the future with their Peacock deal, when their Peacock deal is up? You know, Peacock's US rights to the PLEs and the library, that doesn't expire until 2026. Will they renew with Peacock, or does Netflix already have an understanding with WWE that they would take the entire thing over, including the US rights, post-Peacock? If so, what does that look like? What does that back catalog look like if they migrate over to Netflix? I find Netflix to be more user-friendly than Peacock anyway. I mean, I don't have a lot of positive things to say about Peacock and the layout and search and all that, so I wouldn't mind it ending up on Netflix. But what incentive would they have if you are into the classic content that they have on there? What incentive would they have to continue adding classic content if the people aren't watching it? If they're not promoting it and if people aren't watching it? Peacock has basically given up on posting much in the way of new classic content. I don't know if that would improve under Netflix. I guess it can't be any worse. As long as they take what's already up and they just migrate it over and they don't take away, then I'd be okay with that. But it does concern me that we're not getting much in the way of classic content like we used to, or at the same rate that we used to get posted. The reason for that, though, I'm sure, is that people just aren't watching it. But the way I look at it is, they don't really do a very good job of promoting it. I mean, they talk about the existing PLEs and all that, but all those libraries and the individual episodes and everything, I mean, you don't hear them talking about it. You know, they don't run ads for it. They don't push it on their social media, so it's kind of hard for people to navigate to it if they don't think about it and they don't know that it's there. I'll be honest with you, the only reason I even have a Peacock subscription is for WWE. You know, the PLEs and the classic content. I've been watching a lot of Royal Rumbles this week. If WWE leaves Peacock, I'm going to drop that bird so fast there's going to be feathers everywhere. Because I have no incentive at that point to hold on to a Peacock subscription. But I've said this before. After the NXT deal to CW was announced, but it's worth repeating after today's news, there has not been a more important WWE hire under Vince McMahon than Nick Khan in the history of that company. You can point to individual stars, Hulk Hogan and Steve Austin, The Rock, John Cena, Roman Reigns, who have made Vince McMahon a very rich man, or a richer man. Hogan is the one who I would say comes the closest because he was part of that national expansion in the 80s, and without him being the right guy at the right time, would they have had the same success that they've had? If they would have gone with somebody else at that time, and who that babyface would have been, I don't know. Maybe yes, maybe no. Very likely, maybe not. But in terms of the sheer amount of money that this man has made this company in the rights deals that he has helped negotiate, he repped WWE in 2018 when they made their deals for Raw and SmackDown. That included $1 billion to move the show to Fox. They brought him into the company a couple of years later, and these latest deals for SmackDown, for NXT, and now for Raw, they have set the company up financially for years to come. And this has been the case now for a number of years. WWE was idiot-proof for a very long time. Because no matter how bad, creatively, no matter how bad the product was, no matter how bad the weekly television shows and Monday Night Raw would be, they were always in a good position. They could coast if they wanted to, and a lot of times it felt like that's exactly what they were doing. Because they had guaranteed money coming in from all of these television deals. So they had no incentive to shape up and get better because people were still tuning in every single week, and no matter what they put out there, even whether you had a great show or you had a whole string of bad shows, it didn't matter. It wasn't going to change their bottom line. This company, just from their television rights fees alone, has been set up financially for years to come. Well over $800 million a year now, and that does not include the money that they will bring in from ticket sales and merchandising and licensing. A lot of that is from the deals that he directly helped broker. His ascent from sports agent to president of the company has been quite the story to follow.